Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's event. This webinar is how to implement XLAs to outsourcing agreements. I'll be your host today. I'm John Noctor, and we're joined by our event partners, HappySignals and Brighthorse. And from there, we've got Sami Kallio and Neil Keating. Hi, guys.
Hiya, good to see everyone.
This is a subject which I've really been looking forward to this webinar. We've had talk and it's been a hot topic around XLAs for a number of years now, and both Brighthorse and HappySignals have led the charge around XLAs, but I've not seen much focus on XLAs in the outsourcing agreements, and that when you don't have that day-to-day maybe control and visibility. So seeing focus on this, I think, is essential to our industry. So really looking forward to some expert advice, some great guidance, a lot of explanations. I know that this is quite an in-depth session that the guys are going to be taking us through. Just before I do hand over, please do ask your questions as we go through the webinar. So on the right-hand side of your panel, you should have a little question mark there. You don't have to wait to type your question into the end. Please type them in as they come to you. And hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end to go through as many questions as we can and pose them to both Sami and Neil. Any that we don't have time for, I will pass on to both the guys there to answer and follow up. Also, just below that little question mark is our polls. Now, polls will be launched throughout the webinar, so please keep an eye on that and please interact with the polls. It really helps Sami and Neil just understand what you're thinking and some of that feedback and link that into the questions at the end as well. So right now, it's time for me to get out of the way and without further ado, hand over to Sami and Neil. Guys, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, really excited about this area, and I think the reason why we wanted to do this is that we have been asked so many times how to really do this in agreements, as by our customers, as by the CSIs and MSPs. And I don't want to do this only with our knowledge. We wanted to do this together with Neil. So great to be here with you. Has been an honor and great thing to work on this one. And still, we are going to work on this one even after this webinar. But great to have you.
Likewise.
All right. So as already told, there will be quite a lot of things. So this is very kind of a deep dive to this area. And we are going to handle this in I would say 4 different sections. First, we are going to have a small intro to the companies, then intro to this experience, what really is experience and how we see it. And we need those couple of slides before we really can deep dive to that agreement part, so that we have everybody in this meeting have the same kind of understanding how we feel, what is experience really, and how that XLA thing is done. We are not going to explain widely what XLAs are, because I think you guys most likely have heard about it, and you are here to get more practical advice on how to really do that. Then after we have kind of done the intros, then we go deeper to the should you have sanctions or rewards. Then we go to 4 different models how you could have those XLAs in the agreement. And then in the end, we come to the recommendations. XLA 1.1 recommendation, XLAs 2.0 recommendations. And we are changing who is speaking every now and then. So you will hear both of us speaking even on the same slide. So again, welcome, and let's start to deep dive. So Neil, please introduce yourselves and also the company you are from.
Thanks, Sami. So hi, everybody. As said with John there, my name is Neil Keating. And I'm the CEO, CXO, and the co-founder of Brighthorse. And we're focused purely on experience. So the whole company is focused on how to get the best out of services, be they IT or HR type services. The mission is to change the way that organizations report and measure the success of IT or HR and enabling them to do that by basing it on the success of those people consuming those services. And that's really where XLAs come in. So we're all about experience management. We deliver that in 4 ways. We do have a host of accredited experience education, essentials, foundation, and practitioner. We do assessments. a lot of our time we spend in delivering consultancy, XLA and XMO consultancy for people, helping them build XLAs. But also we work very closely with people like HappySignals and work with companies who want to have tools like HappySignals to be able to measure experience of their employees. So that's who we are.
All right, thank you, Neil. And the same thing shortly about HappySignals. So Sami Kallio, one of the founders of HappySignals, been doing this for 9 years now. So again, same thing as Neil said, we are 100% focused on experience and especially IT experience for bigger enterprises. So we do three different things. So the main thing is, of course, our SaaS product, which is the experience management tool for IT. Collecting data from end users, how they feel about IT, and then turning that to helping people to really do the right decisions. So IT decision-making tool around IT experience. Secondly, we do IT exam framework. So we have implemented that with our customers and partners to really collect the best practices and ways of working for IT, how to do experience management. Thirdly, there is the benchmark report and benchmark data. So we are releasing every 6 months kind of overall understanding how people are feeling about IT. This is based on all our customers. So data collecting from their employees, how they feel about it, and then we combine that to one report. Next one is coming out in October this year, but also, of course, our customers can see the benchmarking in the product itself. In overall, what we do as a company, we help IT to really focus on the experience, creating more value for the business and the end users, and doing that, starting to love their work more. So I think those are the kind of the backgrounds why we are the companies now talking about these XLAs in agreements. And I think it's not the main thing what we are doing as a business. We are not doing it at all. Niall is helping companies to do that. But today we are going to give you kind of the overall understanding of what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. You are not going to get an agreement text from us in the end of this meeting, but you are getting kind of recommendation what you should be doing there and what not. All right, but hey, maybe we start from a short poll to get kind of understanding what you guys are what is your current situation with XLAs? Because I think we have a quite wide audience today. So we wanted to ask you, what is your situation with XLAs and agreements? So maybe John and others, or you can pull up that first poll now. I don't see it, but you guys see it.
It is live now, Sami.
All right. Okay. So let's give some time for people to answer it. So maybe do it so that we do the short intro, and before going to the recommendation, we check the results to see how you guys felt about it. All right. Couple slides intro to the area. I wanted to have this survey result here to kind of give you the understanding, because sometimes we are asked that, hey, it is kind of easier. People are thinking that it's more relevant and more easier to do experience management and even do XLAs in context of internal services. But in fact, what we have seen is that when asked from our customers, and this was done in January this year, when we asked them what is the role of our user experience from the perspective of your CIO or IT director, how important the experience is. If the company have outsourced the first line service desk, 40% of these companies said it is the main target. So based on this survey, which was not a wide one, but still it says that if you have outsourced your service desk, you are thinking that experience of end user is even more important than on average for companies that have an internal service desk. To be honest, what I'm thinking here, what is causing this is that typically you outsource your services because you want to make cost savings. But in a way, making experience the most important target is an insurance on top of that outsourcing agreement. So you want yourself and the partner especially focus on the value that you are creating, and not only that things are efficient from the IT's perspective, but that we make and focus on the people side. But now, Neil, when we talk about the drivers, what are driving people to XLAs and experience management in overall? Could you please open the kind of MSP point of view? What is driving MSPs to do that?
So perhaps I should have said in my introduction, so most of my career before Brighthorse, in fact, all my career before Brighthorse, I've spent in MSP type organizations. So I know MSPs well, and I've worked with lots of the MSPs in helping them build XLAs. And what I can say is most of the MSPs, a lot of the ones I work with at the very least, are doing this because number one, customers are asking them to do it. So 2 out of every 3 tenders, that's a statistic by Gartner, 2 out of every 3 tenders now mention experience level agreements. So it's important that MSPs who want to be on more tenders actually start building experience level agreements. So point number one, I think what MSPs are looking for is to win more customers. But also, they're trying to stop customers leaving them all the time. So I've spoken to lots of organizations, and lots of our customers are saying if the MSP doesn't do XLAs by the end of the contract term, they'll be looking for another organization perhaps who does do experience level agreements, start measuring their experience as well. So if you do XLAs as an MSP does them, it will win more customers, but it will probably prevent customer loss as well. A lot of the maturer MSPs who've been doing this for a while now are driving outcomes for business. So we shouldn't forget that an XLA is really about outcomes. SLAs and KPIs are all about outputs. XLAs are about outcomes. And so those MSPs who have been doing this for a little while now are really driving interesting outcomes for their business, for their customer businesses. And so what's happening is they're having initiatives and projects and saying we can actually improve your experience if we invest in these areas. And that's extending their services into those organizations as well, because they're driving change, they're driving outcomes and using XLA data to prove the success of those outcomes as well. So there's 3 things that MSPs are doing in relation to their customers. But of course, XLAs also help make MSPs more efficient because they're getting data back regularly, which enables them to target specific areas. So rather than a scattergun approach of we're not sure what we should be doing to improve the customer experience, they're getting very direct messages back through the XLA result, and they're able to be much more efficient and target specific areas and make improvements there. So that's what I'm typically seeing when I'm speaking to MSPs and working with MSPs and why they're wanting to do that, Sami.
Yeah. Thank you. I think there is kind of a lot of links to the enterprise side already. What you said there. One thing in a very, very big picture is that the experience economy is changing how people think. It was first the experience of consumers, then business to business, then the employee experience, and that in IT really means the XLA kind of thinkings. So SLAs just aren't enough anymore because, as Neil, you said, they are measuring the output of IT, not the outcome of IT. And many of the audience might have heard about the watermelon things and so on. So kind of understanding really where the beef is and making sure that the business is aligned with both the enterprise IT and the providers. I think those are the things that are driving things towards focus on experience management and XLAs. The last point there, I already mentioned that in the previous slide, that it's in a way seen as an insurance on top of the outsourcing agreement. Maybe another thing that is typically thought about by the MSPs, but I think that is something we hear from our direct customer organizations, that they are thinking that they want to have this kind of insurance, or let's say their procurement want to have an insurance on top of the outsourcing agreement to make sure that the company delivers what is agreed, not the partner. But let's move on to the next one. This one is not the easiest one to explain, to be honest, but we wanted to give you kind of an overall understanding what really is experience. And this example here is kind of showing that how the people, a certain one person, felt during the process of IT incident. And the experience is everything that happens between somebody noticing I have an issue, I have a problem, to the moment they realize that that is solved. And if you really think about what happens between that, there are things that the first line service desk provider did, there are things that the customer did themselves, there are maybe second kind of a level partners that are involved in the process and so on. There might be somebody from different company meeting that on the kind of on-site support and so on. But from the end user perspective, experience is that whole thing that happens between all these different touch points. So in a way, measuring one touch point there wouldn't give you the overall understanding how the whole experience is. And when it comes to XLAs in the agreements, you have to understand the whole thing, what happens between the starting point and the resolution point, and then start to understand what is meaningful there. The individual touch point might be meaning everything from that experience, but only failing in one of these steps might mean that I'm really frustrated, I'm not happy at all. Or there might be some areas that I'm not satisfied fully, but it didn't influence my total experience. And of course, things that are changing in the whole wide world will be influencing what is your expectation levels. But Neil, when we think about the experience, it's kind of one very crucial question is that, what is your thinking? Can you really outsource experience?
Well, it's a good question, and we're asked that quite a lot, actually, Sami. Can we outsource this? My personal view is that, well, I guess it depends on how much outsourcing you're doing, but my personal view is that the company themselves owns the experience of their employees. So I don't think you can outsource fully experience, but I guess what you can do is you can outsource the delivery of some of those things. So if you own the experience I own the experience of my employees, now if I've got a large piece of outsourcing, I might ask them to help me do that. So they're helping me deliver that. So it becomes very much of a joint commitment between us both, I think, between the organization and the outsourcer. I think it's very much a joint commitment, but I think ultimate ownership of experience probably sits with the organization itself. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I think we are coming back to that one when we come to the recommendations that sometimes when you really think about the experience, it's unfair to think about, okay, you are now responsible for this because us as a customer, we have made so many decisions that will influence that experience, that I do agree, it's a common thing between the partner and the customer. They have to collaborate to maximize the experience and outcome of the IT. But we'll come back to this one. Will make more sense to you guys in the audience when we go to the recommendation. Why did we want to talk about this in the beginning? Also, one thing I wanted to kind of underline now when we talk about experience. So this is from our benchmark, and these are the different areas of IT that companies are kind of delivering to the end users. And if you look at this is the benchmark number. So you can directly see that mobile devices and laptops are the ones that people are hating the most, and they are most satisfied with the collaboration and services. And if you would now think about this and do decisions in IT that, hey, we must focus on mobile devices and laptops to make our average end users more happy, in fact, you would be making a mistake. What I'm now trying to say with this one is that when we move to the next one, we are measuring the overall IT experience. And in the overall IT experience, we are asking people, what makes you happy? So you're first asked 0 to 10, how happy you are. If you selected the positive one, so the right one here, 9 or 10, you're asked why. 60% of end users saying that was because we have so good support service. And 53% did say that it's because of very good personal attitude of the IT. If you now jump to the negative side, people who selected less than 7, so they are not really satisfied with the overall IT. Reason why they are not satisfied is again support services. So what this tells us is that even though in the previous slide you saw that average satisfaction to the services, IT support, is even almost 80 in this scale, it is still the one that you should be focusing on because it matters the most. And that's why in this presentation overall, when we go deeper now, we are going to stay in the support services, in service desk area. So we are not going now how you should be defining and what to do in the agreements if you talk about applications or you talk about remote working or something like that. XLAs are relevant in that area as well, but that's not the focus of what we do today in this presentation. Now, the last point when it comes to kind of the introduction, one of the things I hear very often is that companies start to talk about XLAs in the same way they talk about SLAs. And the main focus is in that one number. What is our experience? So I just showed you the one number, 79 is the average of IT experience in the support services. But that is not the key thing. So when you are setting targets and when you're thinking about XLAs, yes, you can talk about that one number. But when you want to really develop stuff, you have to understand where that is coming from and what are the areas that you want to focus on. So XLAs can be set not only on the high level, but you should be thinking about, hey, we should be setting them from the operational data perspective. So this is an example from our product. If you're using some other tools, you can think about it in a way that, hey, what are the areas where we are lacking in experience? So in these screens, you will now see that there are some things that are red. So your experience is not reaching your target, they are under your target. So maybe you should be selecting those as a focus areas, focusing on things that matter most of the people. But that is not the only way how you should be thinking about XLAs and where you should be setting these more precise XLAs. Now think about this screen without any numbers. And you have an IT leadership team meeting to discuss where we should be focusing on. Let's say we are now going to recruit 1,000 people in the organization in the coming 6 months or 1 year. You should be focusing on IT experts, on the people that have just joined the company. You just bought another company, there's a merge. You should be focusing on the new people that joined the company, that you have a common experience in the whole organization. You maybe change an MSP, you are investing 20 million in SAP. So there are things that you might be wanting to focus on with XLAs because they would be supporting your business targets exactly in the next coming year or 6 months. So 2 things, you've selected XLAs to focus on based on where people are lacking in experience, if it's certain service or it's some location, whatever that is, but you understand, hey, these are the areas where we are not having good experience, let's focus on those. But the other part always should be understanding what are the strategies of the company and align IT to those. And that's why XLAs is not a kind of small thing, it is a measurement stuff. You agree what is your focus with the XLAs. And that is not only that one number, because that wouldn't give you any focus. Okay, it gives you focus on experience, but it doesn't give you focus for your people in the IT. Hopefully that makes any sense, and this one may be helping a bit more. So let's say this is an enterprise that has selected now 3 different focus areas, and I will explain why they have done it. First of all, they have selected services to be one focus area of experience, and that's because of how meaningful it is. They have recognized there are 2 issues. Agent skills for some reason are lacking, and then there is service X that they want to focus on because the experience in that application is bad when it comes to support services. They need to have process data related to service X to really understand why that is in a lower level. So with experience data, they have understood that we have an issue here, but they need process data to understand what is different in that service to optimize the service and get better with that one. Enterprise applications. Let's say they have been now made a decision in the company. They are investing to the ERP, 20 million on that one. So they really want to understand what is the satisfaction for people in SAP before the project, after the project. And to be really understand that area, they need to add T data, technical data around that to understand what is really uploading times and how people really use that tool to focus on experience. So they be able to follow what is the overall experience of SAP and certain processes there, but they need other data to understand how the tool really is used, to understand the overall, how people use the services and how they feel about it. And thirdly, in this example, let's say they want the people to move back to the office, if that is good or bad, I don't want to say that, but they want to kind of understand in Sweden that why people are not coming to office. We want to focus what is going on in the office. We want to understand the data at the office, how networks are working, really to motivate people that, hey, it is easier and easy to work at that office. So my point in the slide is that think about the XLAs not only on the top level, because that is kind of the marketing number or kind of marketing stuff, that this is how good we are, important, but not driving you to develop services, which is the key thing in the whole XLAs, or should be the key thing in XLAs and experience management. Please, Neil, could you kind of give our definition of XLAs?
Yeah, sure. So everyone heard Sami just talk about a few slides ago, thinking about experience, and experience really is about how people feel, how someone's feeling about that. And that's really what the XLA is therefore trying to measure. It's trying to measure how do people feel about you, your product, your service, your outsourcer's service, your own service if you're an outsourcer to your customers. And it's an understanding of how people feel. So thinking about just understanding what or how people feel, it's only part of the solution. Because really what you want to do is understand why they feel that way as well. Because understanding why they feel, or at least having indications of why they feel that way, you can actually do something about it to improve their experience. So the model you see on the screen here is showing you, it's like a bit of a version of what we call the XLA stack really. But what it's showing you is that you've got an experience level agreement at the top. That's your commitment. That's what you're driving to. That's your outcome that you're agreeing to. That's what we're measuring. And you measure that firstly with experience data. That's about how your people feel about you, your product, or how your people feel about the outsourcer. We need that. You cannot have an XLA unless you really understand how people feel. So the X data, the experience data, is really, really important. So we need to make sure we understand how people feel. But then if we can bridge that to, well, how well did the operational data, how well did your services perform? How well did your processes work? When people needed your services, how well did that work? And then again, if we can bridge that to the technical data, or T data, as we call that, which is how well did your technology perform as well. So it's the bridging of all those things together, and we call this XLA 2.0, where you're understanding not just what people feel through X data, but also having indications of why they might feel the way they do, because we're also looking at the same time period, well, how well did the services perform, O data, and how well did the technology perform, T data, and one will link to the other. So you might find data in X data that shows you, well, actually, we need to improve services over here, or we need to improve technology over there. And there's various different tools. You can see at the bottom of the screen there. So main tool for gathering X data, tool like HappySignals. That's going to measure people and people's happiness and their lost time. Then you've got operational data, which I'm sure you've all got on the call from your ITSM systems, the ServiceNow, the Avantis, the Fresh Service, etc. And then you've got lots of different technical tools from the likes of NextThink, Eternity, Lakeside, even down to Microsoft, even down to LAN management, server management type of tools. What you've got to do with getting an XLA is gathering all that data together somehow, score it, bridge it together to give you an indication of both what people feel and why they feel that way. And that's the key thing.
All right, thank you, Neil. That's kind of today all we talk about XLAs and the definition of it. We could talk about maybe that another webinar at some point, but I think that's enough for the focus of this meeting. Let's then deep dive through the penalties or rewards. So more like directly to the area of what should be in the agreement, what should be not. I will give you again some data about this, what other companies have been doing now and how this has changed in the last 3 years. Now, when you're looking at this, remember, these are, again, HappySignals customers. So companies who are focused on experience management, who really are doing the XLA stuff already. We did a survey to our customer base 2020. And we asked them that, hey, in your service agreement, do you have sanctions or rewards related to your SLAs and KPIs? And if you look at there, 9% said that they don't have neither. That was 3 years ago. Now this year, January, 38% of companies. Some of these companies are the same that answered this survey 3 years ago. Some of them are our new customers. Sanctions, it was 57%, now it's 31%. Rewards, 4% is now 10%, both 30 to 21. So what we see here is that the companies who are doing experience management, they are dropping out sanctions from the traditional SLAs and KPIs. But now, how do you see these results? I think you had your own points.
Yeah, well, I was really intrigued when you showed me this, and I just wondered whether this is organizations realizing that the old traditional metrics of carrot and stick just not working right for them at the moment. Yeah. Because I still thought that lots of organizations would still have SLAs and KPIs. I mean, I've spent most of my career in MSPs working with SLAs and KPIs and sanctions and rewards, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it's clearly showing that as more and more organizations are thinking about experience, back to the slide you showed a few moments ago, certainly outsourced customers where top of their agenda is experience might be a main driver for them. It's clearly showing that there's no point in putting sanctions and maybe even rewards on SLAs because it will probably drive the wrong behavior. So less people are doing it, less people having neither, less people are putting sanctions on it. And I just think it's a move towards experience where they're thinking actually the experience level agreements or some form of experience metric is what we should be measuring, not just how well the services are performing, because that's not going to be a true measure of experience. So I thought that was a really interesting move. Less people are doing this now. I was surprised, point number one.
Yeah. But of course, there are still companies doing this. But when it comes to our recommendation, Neil, maybe you talk through these next. Do we recommend penalties or sanctions?
So bear in mind, I've worked for MSPs. No, I think both Sami and I would agree here that we wouldn't recommend using penalties for SLAs or XLAs. And the point I was just trying to make in the previous slide there might explain it, because the thing with SLA penalties is they force the providers to do things that don't necessarily matter to experience. They're doing things that people don't really care about. And in fact, what ends up happening is that if you have too many SLA penalties on, what you're forcing your provider to do is do what's right for their contract. So I've just got to make sure I hit all these service level agreements so I don't get penalized on them. and not do what's right for your business. And what's right for your business might be doing something for the people. In fact, what might be right for your business is not achieving some of those SLAs, but making sure that people are more informed, or making sure people are more innovative, or more enabled to do their job. And so we've got to make sure that SLA penalties don't inhibit an MSP to do what's right for the organization's business. What they will drive is, I will just do what's right for my contract because that's what I'm focused on it. And we know procurement like all these things, and we understand that, and we know the market is going that way. So therefore, I guess if you're going to put penalties on them, try and keep it very simple, and use a model that's perhaps driving towards more experiences. So on the right hand side, you can see some options here that we think could be a simple way of just putting, if you're going to do it and procurement is telling you to do it, then maybe you'd have SLAs that say, well, look, if SLAs are not met, but XLAs are improving, or they are met, then actually don't penalize the MSP for that, because they're actually doing something that's right for your business. Maybe driving the XLA is more important than the SLA. So maybe you suspend all penalties when that's the case. If SLAs are not met and XLAs are not met, then of course, then there's got to be some penalty. Maybe that's where penalties do get paid. But if SLAs are met and XLAs are improving, then maybe you need to reward the customer. And we'll come back to that in the next slide as well. But you're looking at all these rewards. I won't go through each one because you can read those yourself. But we're trying to say, use it as a balance, really. And actually what's more important is, think about, is experience improving? Doesn't matter whether SLAs are improving or being met, if experience is being met. Of course, if neither is met, then perhaps there has to be a consequence, and that might well be a penalty. But if experience is going up and SLAs are staying the same or even going down, I would suggest experience is more than just SLAs. So be careful with what procurement do in the contracts. Otherwise, MSPs won't do everything to do with experience, because they're going to be focused on, oh, I just don't want to get the penalties, so I'll focus on the wrong things. So hopefully a model like that will work. It's a simple step-by-step approach that you can take if you have to put penalties in there.
Maybe, Neil, this is a good time to say that we are also doing a white paper related to the same thing that we are now talking today. We don't know yet when exactly that will be published, but everybody who wants to have it after this meeting, you can say that you want to have it when it's ready. Then we explain a bit more about all this stuff that we are now talking in that white paper.
Yeah, the paper will go into a lot more detail. I mean, Sami and I have been working together for a while. The paper will go into more detail and show some of these things here. So I think we've got a poll going to come up at the end, towards the end. If anyone wants the white paper, let us know and we'll send that out to you. But I think we need you to let us know. So yeah, please do. And it goes into a lot more detail in these things.
Right.
And I guess, Sami, here's the reward side. So if you're gonna have penalties in your contracts on SLAs or experience, then you must make sure that you've got rewards in there as well. You can't have it as just a stick. You've got to have a carrot and stick approach. As you heard Sami and I say, we'd rather that organisations at this point didn't put penalties on some of these things because it's driving the wrong behaviour. But if you are going to do it, then perhaps look at rewards as well as penalties. And maybe you've got to look at rewards differently as well here, because there's a couple of things to consider now when we're thinking about experience as part of this. So first of all, experience is cumulative. So it's happening all the time. So you can't look at experience data just in a snapshot. You can't just look at it and say, oh, look what happened in, where are we now, in September, or look what happened in August, then close that down and move on. And that's traditionally what we've been doing with SLAs. We normally look at SLAs in a 1 monthly snapshot, make some decisions, close it down and move on. With experience, because it's cumulative, we want to be looking at it regularly. So of course we want data regularly, as often as we can possibly get it, but we have to look at that data over time. So it's the trajectory, the line of improvement or degradation is the one that's important. So look at it regularly, but view it over a 6 monthly or quarterly period. Has experience gone up generally, or has experience stayed the same, or has experience gone down? It will go up and down, but it's the overall trajectory we're looking at. So that's the first thing that's going to be different here. You've got to look at this cumulatively. The second thing I think that you've really got to think about is that we talked about this right at the start. XLAs and experience are a joint commitment. So if you've got measures onto experience, both the MSP and the customer may need to do something together, because the MSP might say, I can improve experience, and I can show you how I can get from, I can improve experience by 15%, but we need further investment in memory in the devices or cameras on the laptop or additional people, or whatever that might be. And therefore, it's got to be a joint commitment. So you need to make sure that you've got all the suppliers who are involved in your experience. That's certainly yourself. Maybe it's even 2 or 3 different suppliers in a room together to talk about experience when you're thinking about governing and measuring experience. But when you're thinking about rewarding those, of course, you've got your immediate rewards, your financial rewards, additional monthly payments. That's what we're traditionally focused upon. And maybe if your supplier thinks about, I can get you to a higher target, the higher they get you up the happiness scale, then maybe you can give them additional rewards based upon that. But maybe there's other, perhaps non-direct financial rewards that we could consider in these things as well. So less reporting, less meetings, less governance. That helps the MSP be able to get on with their job. Maybe there's contract renewals, automatic contract renewals. A colleague of mine, Alan Nance, if anyone knows Alan Nance, was telling me a great story about Schiphol Airport. And they had 3 contract cleaning companies. And this was about SLAs, not XLAs, but the story still resonates. And they were all in competition with each other, and they're all doing sort of every month, trying to do their own job and beat the other competition. What the company ended up saying is, we're all in this together. This is a joint commitment. We want you all to work together. And in fact, if every single one of you meets the targets, every single organization meets their targets for 3 months in a row, we will automatically extend the contract by 3 months. And I thought that's a brilliant initiative. And think about that in experience. For all those people who are involved in experience, if everyone achieves the targets and experience is going up and we're improving experience by X percentage, whatever that might be, maybe there's a contract extension that you could automatically put in place, a 6-month extension, or maybe there's more reference stories that you'll give them. Maybe you'll do some video references for them or introduce them to other organizations. So, and then there's obviously intrinsic values as well, looking at the intrinsic value of those employees. What do they want? How could we make them, the employees, that even the outsourced employees, be much more motivated to employ experience? So it's not all about financial rewards. There are many other rewards that you do, but I think you've got to think wider than just one supplier. It's a commitment between you and them. It may be a commitment between you, them, and another supplier to bring everybody together and reward them equally because it's a joint commitment. And I think the last point there, think about supplier XLAs. So there is such a thing that you can have, which is an XLA between, if you're an organization and you're outsourcing to an outsourcer, think about maybe having an XLA between your company and their company, not to do with the employees at this point, but just think about, how does that outsourcer make you feel? Do you like working with the outsourcer? Are they flexible? Are they adaptable? Are they doing what's right for your business, or are they doing what's right for your contract? Because in all my life in MSPs, when you make a decision on renewals, of course you make it on cost, and of course you're going to make it sure that they've delivered what they expected to deliver. But the other thing that's really unspoken is, do you like working with them? Do you enjoy the relationship we have with them? And that's really a key point on experience. So maybe having an XLA focused around that, and maybe when you're looking at rewards and even penalties, think about, how do they make you feel? And can I have an XLA in place within then, and reward them maybe with contract extensions, contract renewals, more references, not necessarily just monthly financial rewards like we've done with SLAs, because again, that would drive a carrot and stick and could be quite divisive. So hopefully that gives you some ideas to think about when you're thinking about penalties and rewards with XLAs and SLAs, to be fair.
Yeah, I think in the wider white paper, we're also talking that even rewards might be something that gives some time to understand the experience and really get your own baselines, and then start to talk about more on the reward side. So it's not the kind of thing that is easy to do if you don't have experience on XLAs and really experience management. It's not maybe the first thing to do is having rewards, even though it's very, very positive and motivating for everybody. But it needs to be right, as all targets for people. And if you have scorecards, whatever, personally in the workplace, they might be very motivating, or they might be very dismotivating if you reach target in first 2 months, for example. So that's why even with rewards, maybe be a bit, give it the time that it needs in your own and your partner's kind of maturity.
I think it's right. Sorry.
All right. Hey, I'm now looking at the time. I expected that we will bit talkative today. So let's try to, we have, I would say, 7 slides left in the presentation. So, and I think this starts to be the beef of the whole presentation. So now we're going to present you 4 different options how to do XLAs in agreements. And then we go to the recommendations. We didn't want to jump direct to recommendations, so they will think that we didn't talk about this and we didn't think about that option. And that's why we don't want to jump to the recommendation. We first give you the kind of the how people typically think about this area. And the first thing is we all know how typically the SLAs are set in the agreements. You have that one number that you have to do this and this in this time, or whatever is the SLA that we are now talking about. So in agreement, you could commit that, okay, 79 was our benchmark. So let's say the target is 75. We have to reach 75 or 79. And that is not what we would recommend, even though it's maybe a simple version, but it will drive you a situation that if you are not focusing on really developing stuff, you're not doing right decisions, you are just having one number, and it will kill all development if you go over it. So it's not a thing. And then there are like other stuff that are influencing in a good or bad way the employee experience. The reputation of an organization, if that goes for some reason, there are bad news about the organization globally or some country, it will influence also the IT experience. So it's very unfair to set that one target, not understanding what is the other things that are happening in the economy, like COVID. It did influence the happiness of support services in a positive way. We were measuring about 90, 85 customers at the time when it hit. And most of organizations, they dropped first for a week, and then they started to be higher than ever before. And those are things that it's like now focusing on one number, not understanding what is really causing good experience and what is things to focus on. It will just kill your development. So be careful of setting that one number. And if you do that, set it only for 6 months. And then in the last 2 months of that 6 months, you will see the results. And then you can then set a target for next 6 months. Okay, maybe 1 year is okay as well, but our recommendation is 6 months is a good time period when renewing the XLA targets. There is one exception where this one number might be a good thing to set. And this is maybe something that procurement might like quite a lot. So let's say you are changing your MSP, your experience with that MSP is in a certain level. You don't want to anymore go to the SLAs and making sure that they are working as agreed, because it's more important they are creating the value for your end user. So the outcome is more important than output. In these cases, you could do it so that you set the target for that new MSP that you have to be on the same level that the previous MSP was in a 6 months time. So we know from our experience that every time you change an MSP, the experience of your end user will drop. Average drop is 30 points, which is quite much. When you get back to the right level or the kind of the earlier level, what we have seen is the record is 2 weeks after change, the new provider was on the same level, and this is not normal. Typically, it is from 3 to 6 months before you get to the same level. And this is something that as a customer, I want you to understand that you cannot ask your MSP that after 2 weeks, they have to be in the same level as the previous one. They have to learn your employees, your applications, everything, and that will take time. And again, that is a commitment from both of you. You have to train them, you have to help them to be good so that you get back to the level and over the level that the earlier provider was. So this is kind of then typically what we say is that, hey, reaching that target for 2 months and then you forget this target because it's not anymore relevant. So don't leave it there as a minimum target. But I like committing to one number as an XLA. That was the first thing that you might be first thinking that would be a good thing to do in the agreement, but as said, not recommended.
I guess similar to that really is I see a lot of MSPs committing to a DEX number, so a digital experience number, using tools like Nexthink, Eternity, Lakeside, whatever those MSPs are using. But we often see that's a starting place for MSPs. They like it because it's perhaps more of an objective, straightforward number, and maybe this is another starting point for you. Maybe it's just a digital experience number. Let's get that right. But just think about what we talked about, what XLAs are. So T data is very important. So this is what DEX is. It's T data, it's technical data, very, very important. But that's not an XLA because you really need to make sure that that technical data is bridged to experience data as well, because that tells you what people feel and why they're feeling that way. So it's only really valid if that DEX number is related to experience as well. And the other point I would say, even though I see a lot of MSPs doing it, because it's perhaps an easier starting point, and maybe as a customer you might think, okay, let's start there and move to something else. But as Sami said, maybe commit to numbers that don't commit it for the whole duration of the contract. Maybe there's something you do for a short period of time before you go on to another area of commitment, because DEX scores can be configured and weighted by the owner of the tool. So whoever owns the tool, whether it's the MSP or the internal organization, you can configure those and weight those to something how you want them to be. So be wary of that. Just committing to the DEX score isn't committing to an experience result. It's committing to device health. Important, but only when you bridge it to experience. So that would be my view on that. And I don't know, Sami, you want to copy on the HappySignals side there?
Yeah, I think that this area is something that when we talk about the people process DEX, so X data, O data, and then T data, but we typically are saying that, of course, this is now HappySignals talking, start from the people process DEX in that order. And the meaning of this message is that you need to understand what the people perception, what is meaningful for your end users, before really understanding which of the process data and which of the technical data is relevant for that usage. If you do it another way around, if you start from that tech data, there might be some things that are not working same time and same way in certain applications. You start to invest to fix those technical data issues, but it might not have no influence at all for the end user experience. So you are guessing there, but doing it from the people perspective, then you invest the right areas. So that's the thing. We do agree that T data and P data and operational data, they all are needed, and you really have to understand those. But you can understand them from the perspective that when you understand, okay, these are the issues from people perspective, then you go deeper in those areas. Neil.
Yeah, so this is where, rather than committing to the numbers that we've just talked about there, maybe in DEX or experience, etc., here where the both parties, remember again, this is a joint commitment, both parties will commit to improving experience by a certain target or a certain value. So the MSPs have been focused on this for a while. They already have a sort of benchmark of where their customers have been going. For those mature MSPs that have already had XLAs in for a little while, they already know where the average of their customers is. And maybe they can start looking at the customer base, do a baseline for that customer. As Sami said earlier, this is where that baseline becomes really important. Once you've done the baseline, and again, both of you say, yeah, we're at this position, then you can commit to saying, well, let's improve by X% per year, or let's improve by X% over the duration of the contract, or in the next 6 months, let's do this, let's pause it, let's look at it again, and let's look at the next period of time. Don't do it for the duration of the contract, because that's probably too far, but do it in chunks and start thinking, we know where we are, and let's start thinking about how we can improve. And if you can then start actioning improvement projects, you can show how you're driving improvement experience, and experience will rise, and people will be more productive, or whatever the outcomes you're trying to do. But be very careful again, because it's the baseline that's really important. The last point here, or the second to last point here, really is really important, and that's saying that it's far easier to take people who are sort of very less happy and unhappy and improve that by a larger amount than it is by taking people who are reasonably happy and improving that by a smaller amount. So that's why the baselines and the benchmarks are really important, and that's why we say do it in chunks throughout the course of the contract. Maybe annually or 6 monthly, something like that. And the last point really is a HappySignals number, which says the average outsourcing customer starts at happiness of 52, and over that period of time, the improvement's been 32%, which I think shows that you can absolutely improve experience, although there's probably more to do. I don't know if Sami, you agree with that, but.
Yeah, I think so. I think from the internal services starting point, typically, if I now remember right, it's about 70 the score where they start. So outsourcing service desk has more to do and more motivation to focus on the experience. But outsourcing service desk probably has been really good in improving that together with the customer when the focus is the experience. One thing on the picture there, you can see that the happiness and lost time. So I haven't been talking that today much, but our recommendation is also to have two different things about that experience. So how people feel, but also how efficient they are. So how much time, for example, they lost per ticket and so on. So we are recommending using those two metrics when it comes to that X data. So it's not only the happiness, it's also the productivity of the end user. But that is not the key thing today. So we are not going to go very deep on that specific thing, which is HappySignal specific thing. And when it comes to kind of the fourth option of how to do experience management, and this start to be also very heavily our recommendation or the XLA 1.0 or even part of the XLA 2.0 recommendation. We have been talking a lot about it is a common commitment between the supplier and the customer. And what we think is that it is possible that you have some numbers in the agreement that you should be renewing them in 6 months and so on. We talk about that a lot. But even more important that number in the agreement is agreeing ways of working. That how you together focus on the experience. What is done by the supplier, what is done by the customer. And here on the right side are some examples, and in the Word document there will be more examples on this one, how to do it and what can be done. But agreeing what you are doing regularly together, agreeing how you are setting the targets, what I talked in the beginning with the CIO or somebody in the CIO office to agree what we are doing in the next, what is our focus for the next 6 months, what are the lacking experience areas, and what are those that our business is now driving for, and doing that together with the partner so they can make sure that they are delivering maximum value for you. On the other hand, on the supplier side, there is, for example that, hey, please share the feedback directly to agents so they learn and they know that the experience of end users is important. And that is making their life much more motivating as well. So you're making that common target for everybody. Thirdly, what is in our case and for our customers is that ITXM procession model or ITXM framework that has been done. And it is that both commit to develop services in that way, or you can agree another way, but agree ways of working. And our, of course, example is that ITXM framework and also the certificates. Point of those certificates is doing those and agree that we will do those, is that you have the same thinking, you have the same terminology on the provider side and customer side. It makes things much easier to talk in this quite new experience area. And I think this is an easy jump for the recommendation. So if I collect now the XLA 1.0, which is very heavily focused on that X data. So our recommendation is that you set first only those experience targets. Yes, you should have and think about the other process data and T data to really understand that what is going on. But on the agreement level, you'll be focusing only on the happiness and lost time. But main focus in the agreement is committing in the ways of working, as explained in the previous slide. Secondly, don't do any sanctions, not on SLAs, not on DEX scores, and not even in XLAs. Don't even do rewards before you understand your baseline situation. And agree really how you are setting the targets continuously every 6 months. So because this is another thing for both customers and providers, focus on the things that matter the most in the beginning. Then you can start to add different things into it when you have that experience and you have the common trust that you together can really make people more happy. And I think one thing we haven't been talking too much today is the timing and continuous timing. So this is an example from our product that you set those XLA targets every 6 months and then you follow. And you can see that blue line in the picture is showing, are we going to reach the target? So for me, XLAs also have a timetable. They are not set from infinity. You set a target that, hey, this is now the focus area for an XLA. We want to be there in 6 months' time or in 1 year. You cannot set XLAs for 2 months or 3 months because as Neil explained in the beginning, you will just, when you do the changes, you will just continuous changes to experience. It takes time to see the results of changes that you have done in your services. But 6 months is enough time that you will see at the end of that okay, we are now on a better level. But then if we add the T data and O data, maybe Neil, if you go through this one.
Yeah, and so I'll try and be brief because I'm conscious of the time as well here. But when you get to, you've done what Sami suggested there, and you focus on the happiness, and you're getting to a position where both parties are improving happiness, you can then start thinking about how can I start bridging that across to T data and O data? Now, I suspect most of you are already collecting lots of operational data from SLAs and KPIs. I suspect that many of you are already collecting lots of technical data from various different technical tools, and I suspect lots of you are collecting X data from tools like HappySignals. It's the bridging of that together in an XLA 2.0 that gives you that balanced scorecard. And that tells you both what people feel, but why they feel that way, which enable you then to start focusing your attention on what can we do to improve people's experience. Now, if you're going to do that type of XLA and you've got to that level with your supplier, then weight each of the data points. Now, my view is that you should weight experience data, happiness data. That's related to by the highest amount. So I would argue that X data is worth 60%, T data is worth 30%, and O data is worth about 10%. That would be where I would suggest is a fair and reasonable, accurate score of experience. However, maybe if you're starting out in this way and you're starting on a journey with your MSP, as we've said, we don't want to commit to the wrong things right now. This is still quite an immature subject in lots of ways. So maybe what you do is you flex that percentage. Maybe to start with, flex it more to T data and O data, because that's perhaps more objective. Perhaps that's more, people feel that's more in their control. And then over time, start changing the weighting so it flips more over to experience data, which is, of course, the most important thing when you come to start thinking of XLAs. But you can move that over time. So don't commit too early to lots of these things, because you're going to want to change these things over time. As you learn more, you'll want to do more, bridge more data in, and start weighting and scoring things in the way that's right for your business. So committing too early might inhibit you from doing that. So that's what I would suggest there.
All right. Thank you, Neil. I think we are 3 minutes left in the meeting, so not so much time for the questions and so on. I think we had the second poll there about if you guys want to have the white paper about the same subject, which is, again, a bit wider than the presentation today. But hopefully you enjoyed. Maybe, John, we have time, or do we have time for question or so?
Well done to both of you. That's quite a deep subject to go through, and you've given an awful lot of advice and guidance and views from your experience. So thank you for that. We do have a batch of questions, so I'm going to ask you to be brief on your answers, please. But I would like to go through them if that's okay, because I know these questions are important to the delegates. Just very quickly, just for everybody that was here, the answers to the initial poll that you set, Sami. What is your current situation related to XLAs? I thought it'd be interesting to read out the results, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we have XLAs in agreements, 16%. We want to add XLAs to agreements, 63%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We are a bit hesitant to add XLAs to agreements, 12%.
Yeah.
And what is an XLA? 8%.
Okay.
So I appreciate it's difficult for you to give feedback on that particular poll, but I thought anybody who participated in the poll, it's good to see those sort of results. But the thing that jumped out to me there is 63% of the people attending this webinar want to add XLAs to agreements. So I'm sure your advice and your guidance will be great. Let's go on to some of the questions. I say we are going to overrun, but I hope our attendees can stay with us. I've got 8 questions to go through. So in no particular order, there was a couple that are linked. The first question that came in was, can an organization remove SLAs and simply have XLAs?
Well, my view on that is it's probably not a great idea. I think actually SLAs are important because they tell people what to do and they tell them how often to do it, keep servers up and answer phones. So I think they're important for that. And actually, I think SLAs can indicate experience. What I think you can do is remove a lot of them, the ones that don't impact experience, and maybe get those out. I don't personally advocate removing all SLAs and only going to XLAs, because I think it's a balance of both. So I think, maybe it's a reduction, not a removal entirely. That would be my view.
I did say 4 years ago that I hate them, just remove them. I have grown, and I'm now a bit more soft on that area. I would say you don't need them in agreements, but you need to measure them. You have to understand it. You have to set them. But it's not because XLAs are so more important when it comes to measuring the outcome. And there are so many different, like if you go to SLAs and you try to define them, some services, for example, it is totally okay that the ticket is open 1 week. In certain services, it's totally not okay. And if you try to set SLAs, it will be so complicated that you will be doing stupid stuff in some services and you're not going to reach the target in some others. Yeah. So it's that complication of making them both work is that make sure that the priority is on XLAs. That is something I really think. But you have to understand when you find issues in the experience, you have to have the traditional SLAs to understand, okay, that is a thing that is not enough for that service, if that makes sense.
Understood. Age mellows us all, Sami, I would say, eventually. I'm going to ask you to go back to a slide in a moment, but before you do, I'm just going to jump ahead to a couple of questions. Please bear with me. These one of them is extremely long, and I'm going to read it out verbatim just to be fair to the person who's taken the time to write this in. So the current industry that they work in is driven by costs, KPIs, average hold time, mean time to resolve, and SLAs, and tend to have penalties to the outsourcing organisation. Excuse me, I'll just paraphrase this a little tiny bit. By the services, if they are not able to reach the set targets. Also, a challenge the company that provides the services needs to make money or at least break even and be able to drive cost effectiveness to the higher lower skilled personnel in low cost countries and to make money. And also these type organizations are high attrition rate. So you usually don't get the value or you pay for as it's driven by number and not satisfaction. Neil, I think you made exactly that point. My question is, there is a belief that XLAs will cost more money as the company that sells the service need to invest more in their personnel with rewards, training, etc., to be able to achieve these new targets. How do you see this from your experience, cost versus value of satisfaction?
Yeah, I think that from my experience and my thinking is that it's focusing on experience and XLAs is making IT more efficient. What I mean by that is that you only focus on things that matter for the end users. Of course, you have to do it. If you keep the SLAs and you make sure that these SLAs are met, and then you add on top of that the priority of experience, yes, then it might be that you end up in a situation that you do both. You try to do things that you're just to reach those SLAs, and then you do additional stuff in the most important areas. But in overall, focusing on experience makes you more efficient because you do only things that matter. But that is the trusting, and that is that you have to select the focus areas for development, and not only that driving everything at once. No, you have to set priorities together with the vendor to really reach a kind of efficient IT organization situation. Now, would you agree that one or?
Yeah, I agree with you say. I'll just make some notes there. So I think just doing XLAs in just for the sake of it, that could just add costs, but you're not doing XLAs just for the sake of it. I think you're looking at doing them for the right reasons, which is driving the business outcome. And those business outcomes are likely to be productivity or efficiency, as Sami just talked about there. So it's efficiency for yourself and maybe the MSP, and productivity for your end users. Now that's a brilliant outcome. And therefore, I don't think this is going to add lots more cost just necessarily, because I think you're going to receive a lot more benefit. And I think most of the MSPs that I've worked with aren't adding massive additional costs to run XLAs, because more and more MSPs are running XLAs, so it's becoming almost the norm. So I'm not seeing lots of costs go in. I do recognize, though, there could be a cost increase. I do recognize that, but I think the value you get would far outweigh that when you think about productivity and efficiency. If you're just doing them because it's why not, then that's probably just taking the cost and not receiving the benefit. If you're going to take the cost, make sure you get the benefit. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you both. And I think the next question is an excellent question, something I come across all the time. And I think it's linked into what you've just discussed, but I'd like to ask the question verbatim. How would you suggest to persuade the decision makers, e.g. procurement and C-level, to move to XLAs, as it would mean a change from traditional measurements which drive wrong behavior? In some situations, they still believe this carrot and stick solution is the only way to drive an MSP and not leading with the experience. So I think this is advice of how do you influence the people who actually make the decision to go on this path?
One key thing that we do with our prospects is to discuss about that. Neil kind of talked about that shortly a few minutes ago, that experience is not just feelings. That lost time is correlating with the experience. And if we said earlier that our customers on average have been able to increase the happiness of end users by 33%. They have been able to increase the efficiency of end users by 26%. And that really means that your business end users are saying they are not anymore losing so much time because you are focusing on the services and things that matter to them and making them more efficient. So the business case is not really, you can make your IT more efficient with experience management, sure. But the main thing is that you're making all your consumers of IT more efficient. And that is something that is related also to the reputation of IT. So when you are the CIO and you are meeting the business, are the business saying that IT, you are doing a great job, you're really understanding us and you are delivering value, compared to when you're doing experience management, you go to meet the business and telling them, hey, we know that these are your employees, they have these issues, that's why we are focusing on this. What do you think about this? Compared to going to the business director say, guys, you are again crap, these and these things are wrong. It is more proactive service from the whole IT when you focus on experience management. And again, there is money involved that you can show that, okay, we have now saved you quite a lot of money from your end users, that they are now more efficient. So that's the main thing, what I would say, which is the key thing why people are doing experience management.
And I'll add to that because I think Sami's absolutely nailed it. You're linking this to economic factors. You're linking this back to improvements in the business, efficiency, productivity. The actual how do you do it? Like the word we use is called evangelize. So you've just got to evangelize with people all the time, and that's you've got to keep talking about experience and say all the benefits of experience all the time. And the first step that we come to with organizations is evangelizing. Educate people, not train, but educate people into why experience matters and what good things would happen if you do this, and maybe what negative things happen if you don't do this. So you have got to change culture and sometimes beliefs and opinions, and evangelizing about experience and educating people what it is, widening your ecosystem out, get more people talking about it. That's how you're going to actually change it, and link it to everything Sami just said there as well. And then I think even procurement and people like that will go, actually, this is a good thing to do.
Brilliant. And it sort of links back into a follow-up question from the one around a fear that XLAs will cost more money. And the question is, are there any white papers that can bust this myth? So I don't know the white paper you're working on. Will it take that angle? But is there anything out there that helps bust the myth that XLAs cost more money?
I've not seen anything I mean, Sami, comment if you have, but I've not seen anything that describes it that way. I mean, we send out a lot of case studies. We put XLAs into a lot of organizations, and we have lots of case studies and references of the benefits that people have seen out of it. And we've cut across XLAs across public sector organizations, private sector organizations, and MSP type organizations. So, experience cuts across everyone, and we can show you where the cost is versus the benefits that people have. So I think that helps. We haven't put that in a white paper. Maybe, Sami, that's the next white paper we do together. I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. And the nearest one we have done is related to that every 6 months the happiness or the kind of global benchmark report. Yeah. There is some things that, hey, what has changed and what is cost, but it's not exactly what this question is about.
But probably enough there to get some meat on the bones in terms of dispelling that myth to a good extent. I was going to mention this at the end, but as it's come in as a question, I'd like to just address it now. The good news, Sami and Neil, this isn't a question for you, so you can have 30 seconds off while I answer it. It's about will this webinar, thanking you both actually for a good webinar, but also just asking, will the webinar be available to view? Absolutely. I was going to cover this at the end, but I'll cover it now. As soon as this webinar is completed, it's automatically uploaded to BrightTalk for everybody to access. So just to let you know that. Just a few more questions. They're all linked. And I was wondering, I'm going to test your BrightTalk skills now, team. If we could go back to slide 15, I think there was a question on slide 15, if that's okay. Yeah. So the questions is this just HappySignals customers or broader across the industry?
So this one is only our customers in this one.
Okay. And how do you explain the NEVA score increase from 2020 to 2022?
I think this is, and I think that is the biggest change in this whole one. So I think that is because people started to focus not on the SLAs and sanctions and rewards related to that one. They started to focus on XLAs and maybe having sanctions and rewards on that one, if any. So now read very carefully the title. This is not about XLAs. This is about how they use SLAs and other kind of traditional KPIs in the agreements. So they dropped out those. They used to have sanctions and they have now dropped them out.
Thank you. And we had the same person just ask 2 questions. I think this might be the next slide. So if I could ask you to move on to slide 16. This was, forgive me if I've not got the right slide, Neil, you might need to help me here. And the question is, are we suggesting, you touched on this earlier, but I'll ask the question as I say, are we suggesting to keep both SLA and XLA? I think you've said yes to that. The decision matrix you are presenting will drive wrong behavior.
I think Neil said it on here that we don't recommend to use sanctions on SLAs, but if your procurement is forcing you to do it in a way that XLAs are overrunning the SLAs. But sorry, Neil, this is your
No, you're absolutely, Sami, no, you're absolutely right. So answer your first question, do I think we could, do we get rid of SLAs and get into XLAs? Look, I think that might happen in the future. I just don't think it's the right time now. I think there's lots and lots of organizations, as whoever asked the previous question about their culture would attest to, that people like service level agreements. They're objective, people kind of, they're hard measures and they don't want to get rid of them. I do think you can slim them down and do that. I don't recommend putting SLA penalties on talking about SLAs here. I don't recommend putting SLA penalties on. I think it drives the wrong behavior. All I was trying to say is if you're going to have to do it, and some financial procurement teams that will make you do it, try and do it in a way that you're focusing it more on experience, to try and drive the experience behavior, not necessarily the SLA behavior. But you've got to win the hearts and minds of your procurement team to even probably do that. Otherwise, I just feel that we are at a start, when you're thinking about experience level agreements with your MSP or customer, it's a joint commitment. You don't know necessarily what you're going to find and how you're going to improve things. So do it together and say, let's just do this together. Let's do this great thing. And then over the duration of the contract, yeah, we might want to talk about this. We might want to have that in place because that's probably where the market's going. I think doing it right now will drive the wrong behavior. SLA penalties have driven the wrong behavior for years. XLA penalties will probably do the same thing. So I'm recommending don't do it. If procurement is saying you must have something, try and do it in a way that's driving experience behavior. That's all I was trying to say.
And I think in this webinar is quite hard to keep it separate. Like, do we recommend to measure SLAs or do you recommend them to be in an agreement? And those are 2 different things. So in my head, you don't need them in agreements, but you need to measure them. And they have a role. They're the management tool of IT to understand, are we working as agreed?
Yeah.
But they are not the leadership tool as XLAs that are we improving where we should be improving.
Understood. The next question from the same person, I think I could answer this one, but I am going to pass it to the experts. Why only supplier XLAs? Why not customer XLAs?
So I think that, if I understand the question right, I think that it is a commitment from both. So you should be focusing on the same stuff together. And that is the main thing. Also, when we look at the kind of all the IT areas and we're setting targets for different like applications where you have internal teams. So it really is commitment is not then the outsourcing provider. Of course, you have XLAs on your own team as well in certain areas. But now today we were talking about outsourcing agreements with your service desk outsourcing partner. So that's why it might feel that we are talking only about the supplier side of it.
Yeah, and if I can dive in, please do check the Bright Talk channel. HappySignals have talked about customer XLAs with us before. I know Sakari has taken us through those. So please check out the Bright Talk channel and you'll see some good information on there. This is an interesting question. Forgive me, I'm conscious of time as well, but I'm also we're getting our pound of flesh out of you both on these questions. Some people are talking about ROX, return on experience. Could this be a single metric to include in XLA agreements?
Yeah, I think you can. I think getting to that though is quite complicated, and I think you're balancing off lots of scorecards. So I think you do need. Eventually, you will end up having a return on experience. You have to link your XLAs back to some economic factor. Why are you doing this? You're doing this not just to make people happy. Hey, that's a good thing to do, but you're doing it to make efficiencies. You're doing it to make productivity. You're doing it for making innovations. You're doing it for customer values. So therefore, you have to show that return. If you don't show that return, then your business won't be going down the XLA route, or will stop that. So absolutely, I think it's a great thing. If you can get to that, it's not. You have to probably really think about it. Your business is measuring those metrics already. It's just whether you can see it all the time. So how do you know whether you've got a higher productivity rate? Maybe the HappySignals way of doing it is a really great way, because they're asking the people themselves, do you feel you're more productive? Do you feel you've got more time? And maybe that's the better way of doing it, I think.
Lovely stuff. 2 more questions, team. This one is, can we get a template for incorporating XLAs in an MSP agreement? Are there any templates out there?
I think that is still, to be honest, open question by me and Neil. We have been working on the agreement. There is a part of that is kind of like, this is what you should be putting into the agreement, not really in agreement language, at least yet. But I don't really have an answer for that one really yet. But I think it's you will have some ideas, at least in more practical way than in this presentation. But
we have a version of it. We put them in agreements before. I've certainly put those in MSP and customer agreements before. We have a version of it which we're talking about, where we can put that and strip that down and put it into the white paper. So I think the white paper will certainly give you more details.
Brilliant, thank you. And the final question that I've got on my list here, interesting one this actually, to finish off with. How long has the term XLA been used? I'm asking this because I've worked with contracts that, in addition to the SLA, we had a CSI, Customer Satisfaction Index, which I think were aligned with this type of measurement of CX.
That's a good question. Well, I can say that the concept of experience and moving into the experience economy has been around for 20 plus years. When the term XLA came into everyone's vocabulary, I remember we've been doing this since 2016-17. We did a roadshow called From SLA to XLA, and it was absolutely packed. That was that long ago. Sami, you've been doing this for a long time as well, and it might have been around before then. So I'm going to guess it became a word that people were using probably in 2015, 16, something like that. The concept was around before that, of course, but actually what's happened over the last sort of 5-8 years is more and more starting to see this is actually the way to do it. And the term XLA is becoming much more prevalent now, and everyone's going, yeah, we want XLAs. I don't know, Sami, I don't know if you know more than that, but
yeah, I think we have been starting to use the XLA term, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, not more than that. But that is the time when and there is a differences between different continents, how well the term is known. It was first known very well here in Europe and in UK and other countries. And still last 1.5 years ago, when I was asking audience in Pink event in Las Vegas, do they know the term? And it was, I would say 15% of the people said that they know it. I'm sure now there are all the HDI events, SDI events, everything is talking about experience and XLAs. So I'm sure now it's totally different answer, but it's still quite, as a term, it is quite new.
Yeah. Okay. So no surprise, in your last poll, 97% of people would like the white paper, please.
Okay, cool.
And in a question that just come in, where can people get the white paper?
I think, Neil, we are going to make some noise about it, but I think if you guys now have said it, I think if I understand right, then we will get we can send you the email when it's published. We haven't yet set the date when it's ready. We want to make sure. And now, as I said in the beginning, if you have, based on what you heard today, if you want to give your opinion about it, contact us in LinkedIn or email. I think LinkedIn might be the easiest way to find me or Neil, give your comments. If you really disagree with something or agree with something, we are more than happy to hear the feedback and maybe include that in the white paper as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I would say realistically, Neil, I think we have to set a target that it will be published in September.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But it's not.
And I think if everyone who's polled wants it, I think we were able to send it directly to them. So But back up what Sami says. So if anyone's got any opinions and thinks really strongly about things, please contact us, because we would like to hear that and make sure we can sort of use that to go back into the white paper. So anyone with strong opinions either way, then please let us know.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you to both Sami and Neil. I know that's a very detailed subject, so to try and get through it in the time you did was an amazing achievement, and thank you for answering all the questions. But also a big thank you to all of our attendees today. Many of the questions came through actually as you're asking them, which shows that sort of investment in the subject matter and also the answers you were giving. So thank you to everybody who submitted a question. As I mentioned, this webinar will be available on BrightTalk as soon as it's completed. I will say that we're very lucky to have Sami talking at the Spark conference this year, the SDI conference. So if you want to hear from him and meet him in person, especially if maybe on those disagreements, Neil, or any maybe more positive stuff as well, I'm sure Sami would love to hear from you. So if you are registered to come along to the conference, we look forward to seeing you there. And please do take some time to listen to Sami's presentation and also hopefully get some time with him over a coffee or something stronger. If you haven't registered yet, then please do. It'd be lovely to see you there. But just before I do bring this webinar to an end, once again, I want to say a huge thanks to our event partners, HappySignals and Brighthorse. They put a lot of effort into the amount of detail in this. They've done a brilliant job, Sami and Neil, on taking us through that. So thank you to you both. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and just a quick thank you also to somebody who sits behind the scenes but sets all the polls and gets everything set up, which is to the amazing Lauren. So thank you, Lauren, for managing the event in the background. It's very much appreciated. Other than that, I think I will bring this event to a close now. Once again, thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you to our event partners, and I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.